Hello again, Year 1. It's Friday. Lovely to see you. This week it's National Storytelling Week. So, lucky me, I get to tell you another story. All over the country, children are listening to and telling stories. So, your job today is to tell the story to somebody else. You might tell it to your mum, or a dad, or a granny, or a sister, or a brother, or cousin, or anybody. So, telling a story is a good way to help you remember a story. And another good way is acting it out. So that's your other job, is to act this story out at the end of the story. Also, I'm going to ask you to take a freeze frame. A freeze frame is where you are suddenly freeze in the middle of your story like this, and someone takes a photo. So I'd like you to do that. Take a photo and send it to me, and I can see which part of the story you're acting out. So it might be that you're skipping along gaily. It might be that you're picking flowers. So it shows me what you're doing. It also shows me what you're thinking and feeling in the story. So it might be that you're happy. On your face, your face might show that you're startled or scared. So we'll have another think at the end. Another good thing about telling stories is that you only need to concentrate on listening. You don't need to worry about trying to see the pictures or having to sit still. So today you can just maybe lie on the floor, maybe close your eyes. So here we go. Are you ready? Today's story is Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl and her name was Red Riding Hood. She was called that because her granny gave her a lovely cape with a hood, a bit like this one. And she wore it all the time, and so everybody called her Little Red Riding Hood. So one day, her mum said to her, "Please, Little Red Riding Hood, can you take this basket of food to your granny? Because she's poorly, and she lives at the end of the woods, and it's not too far." "I'd love to," said Little Red Riding Hood. So she picked up the basket of food, and Mum said, "Remember, do not stray off the path through the woods." "No, I won't," said Little Red Riding Hood. She kissed her mum goodbye and skipped off down the path through the woods towards Granny's cottage at the end of the woods. "Tra-la-la-la-la, la-la-la-la-la," she sang as she skipped along. It was a beautiful sunny day. She could hear the birds tweeting in the trees. Tweet, 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 tweet. As she skipped along, she saw some blue flowers. And she thought, oh, they'd be lovely for Granny. So she forgot her mother's advice and strayed off the path and wandered deeper into the woods as she picked the bluebell flowers that she saw. "These will be lovely for my Granny." And then she saw some white snowdrops and picked those too. She was so busy concentrating on picking flowers that she didn't notice how deep she was straying into the woods. Just then she heard a rustle in the leaves and a dark shadow. She looked up, startled, and there in front of her was a wolf. Big pointy ears, long pointy nose with a black shiny end, big bushy tail. "Where are you going with that basket of food?" said the wolf, trying to sound friendly. "I'm going to my granny's. She lives at the cottage at the end of the woods. She's poorly, so I'm taking her this basket of food." The wolf thought. He was thinking of a cunning plan. Now I know that you know something about wolves, maybe from the story of the Three Little Pigs. What do you think is his cunning plan? a nice day, little wolf, Little Red Riding Hood, he said. And he scampered off into the forest at a fast pace. He knew all the shortcuts, and it wasn't long before he'd reached the cottage at the end of the woods where Granny lived, and he knocked on the door. You can knock on the floor. He lifted the latch, and quick as a flash, he trotted in and gobbled up Granny before she even knew what was happening. Ooh. Then he quickly grabbed a nightie and put it on and a cap over his head, and he jumped into Granny's bed and pulled up the covers like this, waiting for Red Riding Hood to arrive. Meanwhile, Red Riding Hood, who had forgotten and strayed off the path, was deep in the forest and had to find her way back to the path. Fortunately, she could retrace her steps, and she found herself back on the path and gaily trotted along towards Granny's house. As she neared, it looked like the door was slightly ajar. That's strange, she thought. She knocked anyway. Granny, I brought you some lovely cakes. Mum's cooked them and I helped her. Lovely, croaked the wolf, pretending to be Granny. As Red Riding Hood walked into her bedroom, she said, Your voice sounds strange, Granny. Well, I'm poorly, said the wolf, just to prove that he was feeling poorly, pretending to feel poorly. Granny, what big ears you have. And the wolf replied, All the better to hear you with, my dear. Granny, what big eyes you have. All the better to see you with, said the wolf. And Granny, what big teeth you have. All the better to eat you with, said the wolf, and he leapt out of bed and started to chase Red Riding Hood out of the cottage and into the woods. Help, said Red Riding Hood. Luckily, a woodsman was cutting wood in the woods, and he heard Red Riding Hood's cries and rushed towards her. He saw the wolf and grabbed him and hold of her. He's eaten my Granny, said Red Riding Hood. The woodcutter cut down his stomach and out popped Granny. He sewed him back up, and the woodsman said, Never come back into these woods again. Off you go. And the wolf scampered off, and the woodsman and Granny and Red Riding Hood sat down to eat all the yummy cakes for tea. The end. So now you can retell the story to somebody, or maybe later, and act it out. And when you act it out, remember that freeze frame. Take a photo of you acting it out somewhere interesting in the story that you like, and then send it to me. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.